For the most part, we are all at the mercy of the media and journalists, hoping they dive deep and track down the real story when headlines flash our way. This real story is a nerve-wracking tale and not at all what was originally posted. This photo below shows astronaut Butch Wilmore receiving a warm welcome from astronauts Reid Wiseman and Woody Hoberg after completing a long science mission aboard the ISS. We all know the story of Boeing Starliner spacecraft launched on June 4, 2024, with the vehicle's first crew mission, astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore. The public was soon informed that some thrusters had misfired, changing an 8-day mission into months of being stranded on the ISS. On April 1, 2025, Ars Technica published an interview with Barry Butch Wilmore, and it is no April Fool's joke. It is the tale of a harrowing experience. This is the picture that accompanied one of the first headlines. The headline read, "Boeing Starliner's first ever crewed mission with Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore on board safely on its way to International Space Station." Before getting to liftoff, Boeing's Starliner spacecraft faced multiple delays. These included a faulty valve on the Atlas V rocket's upper stage and a helium leak inside the spacecraft. There were also weaknesses in the parachute system and potentially combustible elements in the wiring harnesses. The valve issue in early May stood the mission down long enough that Wilmore asked to fly back to Houston for additional time in a flight simulator to keep his skills fresh. Finally, with fine weather, the Starliner crew flight test took off from Cape Canaveral, Florida. It marked the first human launch on an Atlas V rocket, which had a new Centaur upper stage with 2 engines. This photo shows Suni Williams commenting on the first cold night on board the Starliner before getting stranded on the ISS. Both astronauts acknowledged that the launch was perfect. To quote Barry, "It was exhilarating. It was fantastic. Yeah, it really was." After Starliner separated from the Atlas V rocket, Williams and Wilmore performed several maneuvering tests and put the vehicle through its paces. Starliner performed exceptionally well during these initial tests on day 1. When it was time to catch a few hours of sleep, both Suni and Butch found the spacecraft cold, a cool 10 degrees Celsius, and ended up donning their spacesuits early. After a few hours of fitful sleep, Wilmore decided to get up and start working to get his blood pumping. He reviewed the flight plan and knew it was going to be a big day. Wilmore had been concerned about the performance of the vehicle's reaction control system thrusters. There are 28 of them. Around the perimeter of Starliner's service module, at the aft of the vehicle, there are 4 doghouses, equally spaced around the vehicle. Boeing Starliner spacecraft is pictured docked to the International Space Station. One of the 4 doghouses is visible on the service module. Butch states that before the flight they had a meeting with a lot of the senior Boeing executives, including the chief engineer. He was asked what was his biggest concern. He said, "The thrusters." Quote, "The valves, because we have had failures on the OFT missions. You don't get the hardware back." Unlike the black box on an airplane, Starliner's service module is jettisoned before the crew capsule returns from orbit. To quote Butch, "So you're just looking at data and engineering judgment to say, okay, it must have been FOD, which means foreign object debris, or whatever the various issues they had. And I said that's what concerns me the most, because in my mind I'm thinking if we lost thrusters, we could be in a situation where we are in space and can't control it. That's what I was thinking." When vehicles approach the space station, they use 2 imaginary lines to help guide their approach. These are the R bar, which is a line connecting the space station to the center of the Earth. The R stands for radius. Then there is the V bar, which is the velocity vector of the space station. As the Starliner neared the V-bar, about 260 meters from the space station, they lost a thruster, and Wilmore had to take manual control of the vehicle. As they got even closer to the V-bar, they lost a second thruster. The loss of the second thruster meant the loss of 6 DOF, or 6 degrees of freedom, or the 6 different movements possible in 3-dimensional space: forward, back, up, down, left, right, yaw, pitch, and roll. The condition of being single fault tolerant means that the vehicle could sustain just one more thruster failure after the first one, before being at risk of losing full control of Starliner's movement. This would necessitate a mandatory abort of the docking attempt. Mission Control debated whether to suspend the single fault rule in order to hopefully allow a safe docking with the ISS. Just as NASA waived the single fault rule, which would have meant an immediate return to Earth if possible, a third thruster failed, and then, unbelievably, a fourth. So at this point, Suni and Butch are basically powerless and drifting in space. They have the nose of the spacecraft pointed at the docking station but can do nothing. They cannot return to Earth either. Mission Control decides to reboot the thrusters. Imagine that. You're drifting away from the space station trying to maintain your position. The station is your only real lifeline because if you lose the ability to dock, the chance of coming back in one piece is quite low. Probably 0. And now, even though you have no real control, you're being told to let go. Butch was loath to give up control, but in the end he called down to Mission Control and said, "Hands off." After some tense minutes, 2 of the thrusters came back online. Butch took control again, but was soon told to relinquish his control, again, as Mission wanted to try to reboot the other 2 thrusters. Sitting through the perilous second reboot, a 3rd thruster came back on. Mission Control then wanted to put the spaceship under autonomous control, but Butch was more than reluctant to switch. He was concerned that once it went into automation mode, he might not be able to get control back at all should more thrusters fail. In the end, the automated docking on the ISS was a success, and just the beginning of yet another ordeal. Suni and Butch's eventual return to Earth would take months and was fraught with technical and political issues. They would not be taking a ride home in the Starliner, but instead on a SpaceX capsule. They finally made it back on March 18, 2025, an over 9-month-long mission instead of the planned 8 days. But in the true spirit of collaboration, which is what the ISS is founded on, the astronauts on board welcomed Suni and Butch and made the best of their guests' unexpected and lengthy visit.